Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Well, hello there, it's Gemma, and this is episode 285 of the new series of the Cognitive Podcast. This one is called In the City because it's an amalgamation of 2 weeks worth of buzzing around LA. So there's a lot of pictures of my family and I just hanging out at the museums. As I record this, it is Tuesday, May 19th, 2026 at 9:59 a.m. So if you have a look at the pictures in the show notes, you will see my son creeping up behind my husband and I taking pictures of us. And I never see pictures of us together except for family selfies. So I rather like these photos. And they also capture the sort of zeitgeist, the spirit of the moment of what we were doing that day. So there's a lot of Los Angeles in this one. And if you're interested in visiting LA, I hope there's some good information of what you should see, because LA's done some really nice changes recently. Your comments are very welcome. Please feel free to comment on our blog at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com or over on our group on Ravelry. I would say most people see the show notes over on Ravelry, so that's probably the best place to be commenting. Let's see. In the warm thanks department, I wanted to thank Chris Ah and Jasmine Knitmore for both joining me in pursuit of the Bloodroot Knit-Along, and more about that later. And I also wanted to thank the people who contacted me, I think mostly through Instagram and Facebook, about why I skipped the last episode, or rather, this is the last episode. I skipped publishing last week. I kept the podcast dark. That is a topic I have to defer on a little bit, and I apologize for the mystery, but that is not really mine to talk about. I'm going to say it was done as an act of deep respect, and I will probably come back to that fairly soon, but not in this episode, which might be a good thing. I may not be able to talk about it too coherently and keep recording anyway. As always, I want to thank my groups on Finch, on Reddit, on the ground in the Santa Clarita and Antelope Valleys, and of course, in this bunch of listeners hearing my voice right now. I did find a meme that I liked, that I included because I couldn't help myself in the show notes. I wish I had thought of this. It says, I am starting a petition to no longer refer to AI, in quotes, art, as AI art, but instead as computer-rendered artificial pictures. And of course, that gives you the acronym CRAP. Pass it on. I actually think that's a great idea. Joke or no joke, I think whoever thought of that has a brilliant concept there. That the whole thing with AI right now is very disturbing because we're really having it rammed down our throat. And the reality is it doesn't do a whole lot that we need it to do. There's a fantasy that it's helping us. What it seems to be more likely to do is to eliminate jobs and to make the ratio in America, especially, of pay between executives and the working class even worse. I'm an executive. I shouldn't say that I'm not the working class. What I really mean is the wealthy who dominate the AI creation and tech market. Their income is going to get far larger in comparison to the income of the average worker in the street. I don't think that's a good idea. I think that's highly destructive to individual lives as well as careers. Having said that, moving on to happier stuff. Cognitive Fiber Retreat 12. There is the link for the information. One nice piece of news, I do believe we're going to have Jasmine Knitmore with us, which makes me extremely happy. Also, please remember, those of you who are knitting along, we are doing a fashion show for the knitted and crocheted tees. This is because I'm doing them for the first time, and I have the podcast. I run the knitting retreat. Okay, but all kidding aside, because the fiber retreat is becoming a very joint effort at this point, I must say, and I don't want to avoid mentioning the contributions, hugely significant, of Loretta 1031 here. But you can tell who gets to do the major planning phase when I say, yes, my projects are now your projects. Having said that, we're doing a fashion show of those because what always happens at the CFRs, they're scheduled in the winter, and then this is Southern California, we have summery weather. I used to compensate by doing them in Tehachapi, and I wouldn't mind moving them back to Tehachapi. That's a little far, though, for some of our regulars now, and we're an aging group. Some of us, at least. Okay, I'm aging, all right? So I don't know if I want to do that drive. Having said all the silly about that, we will hopefully be showing off t-shirts because it'll be that kind of weather that if you wear a wool t-shirt or a cotton t-shirt that you've knitted or crocheted, it should look just great. I'm sorry about my voice right now. There's a roughly 4,000 acre fire going on in the southern part of the Simi Valley, and we're getting the smoke up here, and you can tell I'm paying a certain price for that. Okay, anyway, CFR 12 is scheduled for November 7th, 2026. Please note that is a change. We originally had it for, I believe, the 14th, and then the group at 11.5 said, could we do it on the 7th instead? And we agreed we would. It worked out better that way for all of us. Okay, having said that, if you're making a bloodroot tea, please come show it off. If you're making a toast, if you're making any of the other teas, because this is a good opportunity for all of us to get a list of good patterns for t-shirts. I have to be honest too, this is my secret agenda. I realized I'm trying to work my way through my sock yarn stash, and to my surprise, I have a lot of semi-solids in that stash. All right, onward and onward. La-da-da-da-da. I didn't finish anything this week, which amazes me because I'm so close to finish on my second Tolsta tee. It's just redundant to keep posting the pictures. It looks exactly like it did in the last picture, just about an inch longer. And I'm just not sitting down with it because I keep thinking if I take it on the train, I'll finish it, and then I won't have anything to work on for part of the train ride. Live with it. So hopefully I will finish it soon. I've got just a small amount left. Maybe a few rows in stockinette and then the ribbing rows. I don't put a lot of ribbing on this. I think the pattern calls for maybe 3/4 of an inch. And that works really well in a cotton yarn, not to have the big ribbing. Okay. The other projects are pretty much where they've been, but I've worked on Tolsta the second. I haven't touched the second Melt the Ice hat. That's become more of a burden than a pleasure, which is annoying me. But that's because the weather's warming up, and of course knitting a wool hat always feels a little weird when the weather gets warm. However, I've been cranking along on the bloodroot tee. I owe a lot of this to Jasmine Knitmore, who started one. I am very happy to see her knitting again. She's been devoting herself to really couture sewing. She's a very good seamstress. And she decided she would knit along with us, which is making me very happy, particularly since I almost gave up on this one. That this pattern is, as far as I can tell, extremely accurate. You do have to pay attention, though, because in the collar and yoke area, because she's not doing a traditional raglan, she's putting sleeves more attached to the sides than a raglan sleeve. And she's avoiding the sort of yarn over holes you get on a traditional raglan like the Tolsta tee. So she's working very hard to make that a solid increase. And you really, really, really have to follow her instructions literally. And I was ready to despair. I did not like the structure of the neck, but I felt committed because I had announced a knit along, and I thought, no, let's hang in there and see if I can do it, because it is distinctly designed for sock yarns, or that is fingering weight. And I really want to get through that stash, and I also really want some short sleeve, lighter weight sweaters for my last full year as a working professional, you know? So I was working on that. And in the show notes, you will see a picture of how far I've gotten. It's very confusing looking. What I would tell you is on the left side of the picture, that's the bottom where the increases are happening, and where the three sections, the left front, the center back, and the right front, have been joined. So I'm in a phase of 8 rows of just increasing on the neckline, the bottom of the neckline, and the shoulder caps. And then the next phase after this, which I've not gotten to, again has some very complex instructions, because you're going to join that all together to knit in the round. So when you're knitting on this pattern, you have to read it very carefully, but it does make sense. It is very well engineered, and as long as you're paying attention, you're going to get it right. It's not that hard, but it looks a little intimidating in print. Having said that, my knitting attacked me. Thank you, Gigi Knitmore. I guess Gigi and Jasmine, that's one of theirs when knitting attacks. And my knitting did attack me. I did the left front incorrectly because I did not read carefully. The fronts are symmetrical to each other as you join them to that center back. So the increases on the fronts will end up at the top of the neckline, which means when you do the right front, you pick up stitches on the main back. You pick up stitches from the bottom of it going up towards the top neckline. On the left side, you go the other direction. I missed that, so I picked up from the bottom on both sides, got my increases on the wrong side, and then realized it actually is ridiculously easy to rip out one of those entire left or right front pieces. So I did, and I had it repaired pretty quickly. Once again, I was channeling Gigi Knitmore. If you don't like it now, you're not going to like it when you finish the sweater. You know, you aren't going to like it a month from now when you've made it even bigger and have to rip out more. And that's one of the greatest knitting mantras there ever has been, I must say. So I ripped out my left front panel, and then I reinstalled it properly, and it worked just great, and it was an easy enough fix. At the end of that, you do this massive row where you start at the top of the left front panel, knit it again, it's only 30 stitches, and then you pick up stitches along the bottom of that same panel, because that's going to extend into the yoke, and then you go back and collect all the live stitches you saved at the bottom of the back piece, the center back piece. Then you're back at the right front bottom. You're going to pick up those stitches. It's not a lot of picking up. It's only 30 stitches on each of these panels. And then you go back and you knit along the live stitches you saved at the top of the right front panel. And this sounds complex, and I guess it is. It's not when you're doing it. It's not hard at all. When you make these pieces and you do the original back piece and then you attach by picking up stitches the right front panel, and then you attach the left front panel and knit it, it's going to become logically obvious what you have to do to continue the sweater. So what I'm saying is, don't be intimidated by those instructions. One thing I did that I liked, I put the whole pattern on my PDF reader, my Remarkable. You can do this on an Apple iPad if you have an Apple Pencil. You can do this on any of the other PDF readers that let you things like the Moby script, or there's a whole bunch of these things out there now. Okay, I put it on there and I highlighted all the parts that were relevant to my section, which I think I'm doing size D as in dog. And I literally crossed out on that PDF, on the image on my Remarkable, all the sections that did not and never will apply to me. As far as I'm concerned, my weight is stable now. Thank you very much. So I would say, whatever you use, I know there are knitting applications also, and I don't remember their names, Jasmine would know this, that let you put your pattern in the application and then edit the pattern or mark the pattern to show the stuff that's only relevant to you. Those things help with this pattern. This really helps. Otherwise, I'd recommend you print out the pattern and you go through it with a highlighter and you X out the parts that do not apply to you. Make it as easy for yourself as you can before you start this knit, because it is a complex pattern, but it is not necessarily a difficult pattern. The only skills I've been using are knitting, purling, make one left and right increases, and picking up stitches. I mean, this is nothing really all that shocking or difficult. I have to hand it to the pattern designer because this must have been incredibly challenging to write. But there it is. Okay. Meanwhile, I am working on the Stolen Neighbors quilt project. I am still just randomly seaming together strips that I have left over from all my work on scrap fabrics. And there's no real news there. I think I got that into the last episode with the pictures. I really need to sit down on a Saturday or maybe next Monday on Memorial Day, which, yes, I have off, thank you, heaven. I really need to sit down with a cutting board and a rotary cutter and start cutting those puppies apart and then reassembling them so I can send it off to the people in Minnesota. This is not a hard project. If, like me, you have a lot of scrap fabric lying around, this is a very easy project. All it takes is a cutting mat, a rotary cutter, and maybe some scissors. I mean, you can whip these things out really quickly, and I do encourage you to donate to this. The links are in the show notes, and once again, thanks to our Turbo Gal for giving us this information. Meanwhile, no spinning. Oh, shoot, I'm embarrassed to say no running. Oh, let's get to a strategy. Well, I realized this week that I went into my Apple subscriptions on my phone and realized I have subscriptions I had simply forgotten about. But also, since I've been using the Picture This app, which I'll come back to down in the blather, to identify plants, that renewed. And when that renewed, I got a warning from Apple, it's going to renew. So I went in my subscriptions and I said, oh, here's a bunch of things I'm not using. And so I went through my subscriptions and said, this is really good. And then I went through my banking application and looked at all my payments there to make sure I understood all of them, that I wasn't just sending out automatic subscription renewals through my bank without paying attention. And I went through my one credit card, because I only use one. And that's part of our financial management plan, is we got ourselves down to one very good credit card. It's an American Express. I've always gotten excellent service from them compared to Citibank or Visa. So we keep it at one American Express, and they never let me down. So I went through my Amex payments to make sure I wasn't paying any other subscriptions. And then I went through all my emails, and I started canceling these subscription mails from knitting companies and dyeing companies, emails that didn't originate from another human. I started weeding those out because I don't need them. I have a huge amount of stash. I don't need mechanically, that is computer generated stuff clogging my email. And so I went through eliminating those. To my surprise, I got back to my old habit of I will unsubscribe to 10 things per day. And I did 10 things per day for several days. I still have subscription stuff coming in. Some of those are very, very hard to get away from. So my email app will say unsubscribe. This is from a mailing list, and I hit that. But if it keeps coming back, now I'm on an iPhone, so this is iOS tech. I will ask to see the contact card for the originator of the email. That means I click on the sender's email, and then it'll say see contact card, and I say yes, and I go to the contact card and I block it. And then I also hold the cursor over it and it says delete or delete and mark as spam. I do that too. So when I say weed these babies out, sometimes it's some pretty heavy duty work. And, back in the day when Stephanie McPhee used to say knitters are the best people and came up with all that stuff, and that's lovely. And I think by and large we mean to be the best people. Yes, we try to be good. Stephanie Pearl McPhee, was it? Anyway, as you can see, I just don't keep up the way I used to. You know what? That's not really it. Knitters with businesses are using technology like every other business. I do not begrudge them this, but I don't need my email box full of this. And of course, there's a lot of other things, and they come and they go. I block them, and then 6 months later, they seem to randomly pop up. So blocking all this garbage really is an ongoing project. It should not be. It should be once they're blocked, they're blocked. But it annoys me. I don't like simply skipping emails and leaving them there. I like my email feed to be relevant to issues that interest me. And if I never got email again, I'd actually be pretty happy, as long as I could still communicate with my friends. There are days I miss pen and paper letters, let me tell you. Okay, so I am not yet running, and it's been very windy here, and now we've got fires. So, yeah, I'm not taxing my breathing, to be honest. I haven't been out on the e-bike. It's a little disappointing. You can see all the links, though, to upcoming races that I'd certainly like to be getting in shape for. The first one is the Sugar Daddy 5K on June 20th. That one's a little challenging to get to and all that, but I'm going to do it, I hope. Even if I walk parts of it, that'll be okay. On to the fluffy books. I am currently listening to Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter. This is a cozy set in Montreal in the 1920s. I learned that from reading the cover blurb. I would not have really known quite where she was setting it. I thought she was in Paris or something. It's okay. This is a good writer. This is Heather Fawcett. And I've reviewed her books before, and I really quite like her stuff. This one, not so much. It's taking me a while to get into it. And it's okay. I'm early days in. I'm on chapter 11. I think the problem with it is the opening lacks steam. Like, the opening is these two sisters looking for a building to rent to put their cat rescue in. And that's cute, and it's got cats. That's always a bonus. And you find out it's because of an accident between magicians, that they're nasty people and they ignore everybody else's needs and they play nasty pranks. Anyway, the magic users get kind of annoying. I felt that the author's trying to use atmosphere to compensate for what is a somewhat bland story, although the atmosphere is imaginative. So we'll see if that one gets any better. I am listening to it to the end. It is good enough to do that. I finished The Antiquarian's Object of Desire by India Holton. That's a winner. This is a 3-book series about love's academics, as she calls them. The middle book, not as good. First book was great, was very imaginative, and this one comes back to that level. Nothing by India Holton should be skipped in my world. She's funny, she's incredibly witty, and the one-liners are amazing. She writes about people who are obviously on the spectrum, and they're just people. It's really nice, But she's not saying, oh, look, this person has some form of autism, blah, blah, blah. She's not doing that. She says in her own blurbs, if you read her blog, that she's doing that. And what I think she's contributing there is by not having everybody point at the character and say, looks like you're on the spectrum. By not doing that, she's just simply showing these are normal people. There is a part of me that misses the days when we didn't label everybody who was a little different. Now, yes, that enables them to get help, but I think we overdo it. And so now people walk around labeling themselves, and I can't tell you how annoying that is, that people take diagnoses they don't understand and stick it on themselves and introduce them that way. Introduce each other, introduce themselves. It's very frustrating to someone in my line of work. And what I like about India Holton is she's pulling all that out and just simply saying it's okay to be a little bit different or a little less social, and you still form friendships and you still get on with things. The ending of Antiquarian's Object, where she starts tying the 3 books together, is charming. It's a good one. All right, I also finished How to Lose a Goblin in 10 Days. That turned out better than I expected. I began to really enjoy it about the middle. In the first half, it's predictable, and what she does is loses her title's suggested plot in the first half. You think you're going to read about a 10-day journal between these 2 characters, and it'll be, hate into love sort of thing, and that's cute. And it does kind of work that way, but you get through that in about the first 5 chapters, and then she actually tells the story she's there to tell. And that's where I began to really like it, where she's criticizing the logic of Tolkien in saying the wizards who come along and recruit these little innocents, the halflings, are kind of evil. That's kind of messed up. And I really like her criticism of it, because when I read Tolkien in college, of course, I was a young feminist but didn't know it. And I didn't want to be a feminist. They were bad, bad, bad. I was from a very politically conservative family, all that stuff. But I read The Hobbit, and I thought it was facile and condescending. And you don't want to hear me on The Wind in the Willows, which I find simply nauseating and sexist and patriarchal, but every British person I know loves it. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, but I read Lord of the Rings, and I have to say I much preferred the Harvard Lampoon parody Board of the Rings. I thought they got it, everything that was wrong with it. And I never could warm up to Gandalf. I felt like he was a jerk and that he was basically misleading the hobbits. And then, of course, they see elves and they get wowed and they volunteer for what they can never do. And yes, you get to this lovely message about how the little guy, quite literally, is the most important thing in your culture. And okay, I'll take that, but man, the rest of it. So I really came to like How to Lose a Goblin in 10 Days, because it's a critique of that. And the little guys unite against the big overlord at the end. It's really great. It makes you feel good. The links to all these things, by the way, are in the show notes at cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com if I'm stimulating your interest. I also finished The Faraway Inn by Sarah Durst. I had read her earlier cozies, which were set in a greenhouse. And I'm not going to go through those again. And when I started those books, was it The Spell Shop was the first one? I was interested in their novelty, but I didn't think she was a very good writer. She is now. The Faraway Inn is very, very delicious. I really deeply enjoyed it. The characters push my limits of credibility. These 15-year-old kids who basically single-handedly in a week renovate an entire house. No, I appreciate their work ethic, but it's a great book. I really, really enjoyed The Faraway Inn. I like the casualness that the lead character's parents are her mothers. I like so much about it, and I would recommend it. All right. I am currently reading the most recent Beatrice Hyde Clare mystery. This is A Wretched Folly. I put the link as the most recent Beatrice Hyde Clare mystery because the names run together in my head. And they're a romp. They're Regency romance mysteries, light on the Regency. She doesn't write as much atmosphere as she tends to write in her other novels. But I really like Beatrice Hyde Clare. Yes, I've complained in the past that the central character overthinks. We hear too much about her thoughts, and the author clearly gets lost from her plot and her dialogue sometimes in this. That's still true in this book, but not as annoying as it gets in the related series about Verity Lark, which those drive me up the wall, but they're part of the continuity of the Beatrice books, so I read them. Anyway, I enjoyed A Wretched Folly. It's a little lighter on plot. You kind of see it coming a long way away, but at this point, I'm keeping up with Beatrice and Damien, Duke of Kesgrave. I'm enjoying them. I'm also including some books I found at the Craft Museum, which I think has a full name like the Culture and Craft Museum or something like that. It's right across the street from LACMA, the LA County Museum of Art. It's in a brownstone house. The front of it is painted in rather garish yellows and pinks. But I was there 2 weekends ago on Mother's Day weekend, and I have to tell you, it's very worth seeing. I wasn't sure what it would be quite a museum of, but it's mostly more contemporary use of craft in everyday life and art. It's sort of about that overlap. And so I have to tell you, the bookstore is worth going into because they have kits for all sorts of different crafts. And thank God they don't have woobles, okay? Can I just say that? They have felting kits. I don't remember if they had crochet little amigurumi animal kits, but I was kind of relieved that they weren't stocking woobles. I'm a little woobled out. But, I'm glad for the woobles. They're helping to revive the idea among the younger generations that craft can be fun. Anyway, you can see the books I want to get there. I did not buy them because I bought instead steel darning needles for clothing repair, which I've been looking for forever since I saw them online. And I bought a magnetic needle case. I'm not sure if I'll ever use it, to be honest, but I could put little embroidery needles in it if I was paying attention. And I had just a great time roving the displays, and I'll come back to the blather, but then roving the bookstore was equally good. Something I really like, the Picture This app for identifying plants. I have talked about this before. I keep an ongoing subscription. I think I'm in my 3rd year of it. This is one of those apps, if you have any kind of gardening, planting, or whatever, you should have this app. This is so helpful because I'm still working in a very laid-back way this year on improving our property with more native plants. And it's hard because our local nurseries don't sell them. They sell English garden plants, is the way I would think of it. Plants for environments that are much more humid and wet than our environment. So I had located online places like High Desert Gardens to buy plants. But again, I really wasn't sure what kind of plants I should get. Now, LA County, little known to me, had a program to help homeowners do this, and I missed it. One of my colleagues told me they redid their whole front yard with a grant and support from this program. So I missed that. So what have I been doing instead? I've been roaming my locale, finding plants that are thriving in hot parking lots. Like I'm saying, well, what does survive up here? And I realized the people who could teach me are the people planting for landscape up here in the desert. And that's how I found the plants that are working here, my rosemary and my desert sage, alias autumn sage, alias Mexican sage. Those are my biggest successes so far. And so I know I could use ice plant. I used to hate ice plant because I lived in the Bay Area too long and everything was ice plant up there. But anyway, if you want to see what you're looking at that is thriving in your region and you want to put it in your garden, the Picture This app is really worthwhile. I don't remember what the subscription price is. I think it's like $20 a year. It's no big deal, but it's very, very useful. You can also see my links to the ice resistance patterns, to places you can donate to support people impacted by ice, and to also see the links by the crafters who are supporting Minnesota as they're being aggressed by ice. And once again, I'm going to say how humiliating it is as an American who's always been proud of my country that I am now posting links that are trying to defend the innocent citizens of my country from the government of my country. I really am hoping this time doesn't last long. In the meantime, you can also see Project Back episodes on Proton. Now, in Green Fingers, there you can see the kind of thing I'm talking about with the picture of this app. First, there is my desert sage plant under the edge of the house, right next to the man-eating plant Audrey 4, which is still going gangbusters in the shade. I had to cut her back seriously because she was trying to get into the house. Literally, we were closing the front door of the house, and Audrey 4 was sticking entire branches through the sides of the front door. And no, the front door is more airtight than that. It really shows how aggressive she's been. So anyway, next to her, because I assume she's getting a lot of water, I put in a little desert sage, and as you can see, it's going gangbusters. So that is a plant that will be going along in the front of the house now, and it blooms in this insanely beautiful dark red, and it's blooming like crazy. I also had planted that by the driveway, and again, that patch is not doing quite as well in full sunlight, but it's okay. It's growing. It's just not quite thriving like this one is. Below that, as you walk down the Miracle Mile, that's a mile of Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, you will see that wonderful sculpture. You can see the building next to it for scale. It's like 2 stories high. I cannot remember the name of it. Sorry, if I'd published this last week, I would have been able to tell it to you, but no. But it is, on one side, the artist's son's wooden toy horse, his riding horse, and on the other, a dinosaur, because he was trying to memorialize his son's childhood innocence and love of unbelievable toys, I guess. Now, what's really endearing about this, and makes it worth it to me, is as you can see, it's in bloom, that it is covered with regional plants that do well in exactly the environment it's in, a hot concrete neighborhood. And so those are all drought-resistant plants. So there's a close-up picture next to it of the plants, and I whipped out my Picture This app and started using it because this thing is great for what will grow exactly in the desert where I live. And I was so grateful to have the Picture This app, but I was also grateful for this sculpture because it's an enormous contribution to local gardening. Apart from being really a cute sculpture, a nice piece of art. I don't mean to sound reductionist, but there you are. But it's really helpful to see somebody plant this and make it thrive. Now, if you look in the dead center of this, you will see inside it, there's a self-watering mechanized system. But even so, these are all drought-resistant plants. They just set it up so nobody has to hose the thing down once a week. So I highly recommend, if you're in LA, you go see this thing. And if you're me, take pictures of all the plants and then look them up and plant them in your desert garden. Put a lid on it. I revived an oldie but goodie, the butter chicken. My husband usually cooks, and we're usually all busy these days because my husband's running my son back and forth to college, which is pricey in these gas inflation days. I'm trying. You don't know how hard I am working not to be political. And am I succeeding? Not really. Okay, but I'm trying. Okay, anyway. And so my husband tends to cook at night because I'm seeing patients till 5 o'clock. And he is a good cook, but he often just throws things in a frying pan and calls it dinner. So I said, okay, let's bring out the Instant Pot and get a little more flavor. And so I did that. And this time he chopped the chicken. Normally we put entire chicken breasts in this, and it works just great that way. What happens when you chop the chicken is a little bit magical. When you don't chop it, when you have just big pieces in there, the tomatoes, when you lift the chicken out, the cooked chicken out, and then you mix the sauce up with an immersion blender, the tomatoes go into the sauce, and you get a red tomato-flavored curry sauce. When you chop the chicken, believe it or not, the tomatoes cling to the chicken. So when you lift out the chicken, you get a yellow curry sauce that to me had a lot stronger Indian flavor. If that makes, well, what I think of as Indian as, a girl raised in the Philadelphia suburbs, let's be real. But it was an interesting experiment, and we quite liked it with the more yellow sauce. So I suspect from here on in we will be chopping the chicken before we put it in the Instant Pot. But if you want an easy, really delicious dinner, takes an Instant Pot and an immersion blender. Now you could pour the sauce into your regular blender, but I really like my immersion blender for this. Anyway, if you want that, there is the recipe once again for the butter chicken in the Instant Pot. Below that, I have some pictures from the Craft Museum, and I just put these throughout the pictures from the museums because I couldn't help it. They were taking up too much space in the blather. I love that. That is Porfirio Gutierrez. I can't roll my R's right now. That is him dyeing yarn with, it's cochineal dye. I always thought of that as coming out more towards purple or in a sort of red violet. His came out deeply, impressively, sensuously red. They put somebody's bowl in the middle of it. Actually, I think Gutierrez did. Sorry, I'm really lame today. And it's so beautiful. It's so striking. This is on display in the middle of the display devoted to Jerome and Evelyn Ackerman. I really love the Ackerman display. I'm a little puzzled why they mixed other works through it, but nonetheless, look at that yarn, man. Look at that color. I almost ripped it off the shelf and said, you guys can have the bowl, I'll take the yarn. What a waste of good yarn. It needs to be knitted. This is going to lead me down to the blather. So, 2 weekends ago, Los Angeles opened the extension to the underground, the D as in dog line. What used to be called the Purple line. And probably still should be to avoid confusion, to be honest. I think the colors are more striking. Nonetheless, the D line was always slated to go up Wilshire Boulevard, which is an affluent downtown business region that turns into Beverly Hills, the wealth region. So you can imagine the wealthy people blocked it for years. So we don't want downtown trash coming into our wealthy neighborhood, yada, yada, yada. Of course, they built a big shopping mall. That won't bring anybody right. And there are bus lines. That won't bring anybody. Yeah. So finally, the city won out. This line will eventually go almost to the coast. It'll go out to the Veterans Hospital by UCLA. This is a great idea. UCLA also needs a subway line. This is a great idea. It takes traffic off the streets because, let's face it, there are buses doing the same route and they increase commuter traffic. So having said that, I decided to go ride the new D line, and the city of LA made all the buses and undergrounds free for the weekend to celebrate the opening. And of course, this one now currently ends in Beverly Hills on La Cienega. But more important, the second to last stop at Fairfax and Wilshire puts you right smack in front of all these museums. The Academy of Motion Picture Museum, the Peterson Automotive Museum, the Craft Museum, and the big daddy of them all, LACMA, which opened its new wing, the David Geffen wing. And the Geffen physically is as large as all of the remaining buildings put together, as far as I can tell. It goes on for about 3/4 of a city block, and then it crosses over Wilshire, its second story, 4 lanes of car traffic, and comes down on the other side. It's not fully open. They're going to put a restaurant and a wine bar and a theater into it, but it's huge. So I went down on Saturday to ride the D line and go to the Craft Museum because I didn't think the boys would be interested. And so you can see me taking pictures all over the place, and everybody was. It's very funny. You can see the new stations and the new line. And there you can see in the fourth picture, the front of the craft museum, it's a house that they've painted bright yellow and black with pink and white. It's pretty exotic. And it is, when you get off the underground station, about a quarter mile to the east of the underground on Wilshire. Worth the walk. Believe me, it's great. You can take a bus up Wilshire, I forget the number, that will drop you right in front of it. So you can get off the underground at, say, Wilshire and Western, pick up the bus up Wilshire, and the stop puts you right in front of the building if you have difficulty walking. But I wanted to ride the D line, as I said, so I did. And so you can see pictures. Now, the Ackermans, Evelyn and Jerome, they're interesting because they were a pair of artists out of Wayne College's Master of Fine Arts program. They met there, they married, they moved to LA, and they started their own manufacturing of household arts and objects. And the interesting thing about them, this was in the 1950s, Jerome Ackerman realized that Evelyn Ackerman was way more prolific than him as an artist. He writes that he would get up in the morning and she would have gone out for her daily walk, and there would be about 12 ideas stacked on her desk, and she would sort them. This one should be fabric, this one should be a wood burning, this one should be felted. And Jerome realized that he was the business mind and she was the prolific artist. So while he continued to make art, she made the lion's share of the artistic projects that he then mass-produced for sale. And when you go through this display, you will realize how much of Evelyn's work you actually recognize, or you recognize its influence. So I chose a lovely one of a woman holding a basket of what I assume is fruit. And it's just a fabric print and it's gorgeous. And next to it, you can see a picture of finger puppets she made for little kids in her extended family. And they did a beautiful display of that with the materials she used. So you could sort of see the way her studio looked as she was manufacturing these little doodads. I don't believe the finger puppets were ever commercially sold. You can also see that they're influenced by Guatemalan puppets, which you can see all sorts of those over at LACMA. It's a wonderful display. I highly recommend, if you're in LA, you go down Wilshire and you get yourself to the Craft Museum, the very recognizable Craft Museum across the street from it's across the street from the La Brea Tar Pits, which are at the end of the whole expanse of the campus of LACMA with the Geffen. Okay, so that was Saturday, and then I experimented with going overland up to Los Feliz because the weather was gorgeous that day. And I wanted to be outdoors. I didn't want to keep taking the underground and then go back to the train and then take the train north to Glendale and then take the bus backwards over to Los Feliz. Instead, I took the underground to Vermont and Sunset and got off and then just walked up to Los Feliz. You can also cash the dash buses for the observatory and for Hollywood. You can also get them going up to Los Feliz. But it's about 4 long blocks, and I really enjoyed the walk. And so I took myself out for sushi at Starfish, my favorite place up there. I visited the Little Knittery, and I believe I added to the stash toss, in fact, to account for that. The stash toss is 25 in, 43 out currently. Yeah. Okay, it's true. I bought 2 more skeins because I had bought 2 skeins of solid sock yarn and realized I have nowhere to use them, so I bought 2 more. So hopefully I can make another sweater. All right. So then on Sunday, it was Mother's Day, and the boys were lovely, and we had the roses and the cards at breakfast, but we all hopped it onto the train and rode south again and back to the D line, and I basically repeated a lot of what I did the day before, except we went to the Geffen, and the Geffen was wonderful. I do recommend it. If you imagine this long box that suddenly does a 45-degree angled turn to go across the top of Wilshire Boulevard, yeah. And the first story is the store. You know I liked the Geffen because I didn't even go to the store. We went to the second story galleries. This is a beautifully laid out, thoughtful museum. And it feels like a private art gallery more than a museum. In other words, things aren't all crammed in, but like a private gallery, they are a bit higgledy-piggledy. That you do find some things in close proximity to each other that are hundreds of years apart in their creation and very different in their genre. However, you're in this big box with windows down both sides. The light is incredible in the Geffen. It comes at you from every direction. In the center of the big box, they did put some enclosed rooms so they could show films and also so they could display things like fabrics that will disintegrate gradually or bleach in the light. But the Geffen, as you can see from the pictures at the top of the show notes, you can just sit on those padded benches, stare out at the LA horizon, and it's beautiful. I highly recommend it. The only regret I had, I didn't feel there was any good eatery real close, but you can walk out to the corner of Fairfax and Wilshire and catch a bus or walk a long 3 blocks and be at the farmer's market next to the Grove, which is your sort of chain store, outdoor mall, shopping center. But yeah, I wish there was a little more eating right around these museums because I enjoy... Oh, that's my 10 minutes to patience warning. I wish there was a little more interesting eatery around these places because I really love to go to a museum and then have a nice lunch and call it a day. That's my idea of a really exciting day out. But anyway, so we did that. We then cut back by the same route and went across to the Glendale Galleria from Los Feliz on the buses and had conveyor belt sushi at Kura, which we all love. In the middle of that, I complained that it was Mother's Day and we didn't get any kind of little toy at Kura, and they obligingly shot a little button down the slot to me, the toy slot, and it's a Tamagotchi image that flickers between one character and another. It didn't photograph well, so it didn't make it in the show notes. Okay, having told you all this, this past weekend was a bit of a repeat. I really was tired and just sort of out of sorts this past weekend, a bit sad. And so I just wandered around the city drinking coffee and eating sushi. I have to be honest, I kept meaning to go places. And I did get in early on Saturday morning, but I don't think I really did anything too meaningful. I had wanted to go over to the Strawberry Festival in Ventura, but decided I wasn't in the mood. And instead I went up to Pasadena on the A line, the yellow line of the Underground, which goes out of Union Station. And I walked across to the Pasadena Conference Center, and there I wandered through their craft fair and bead show. Now, normally when you go to this, it's all beads and it's kind of boring unless you bead a lot, which I no longer do. However, this one was really good. They had a lot of clothing and a lot of ceramics and some very nice prints. I did end up picking up a print of 3 cats as the Fates. It is purely a coincidence that the middle cat looks like Minerva. Her name is actually Spooky, the artist told me, but really everybody in their lifetime is going to have a black cat named Spooky, I suspect, except me. I've had Carla, Smudge, Fearless, and Minerva. But anyway, she was another fan of black cats. I always have a black cat because when they go to shelters, they're frequently put down because people have stupid superstitions about them. However, I'm half Italian. Italians know that black cats are good luck. Having said that, you can see all the links to my usual resources in my calendar, and that takes me down to Minerva getting the last word. Minerva is mystified that I have immortalized some stupid pony dinosaur with flowers all over it in my show notes. So Minerva would like you to know that she is just as good as any stupid pony dinosaur. We all know this. But when you live in community, when you are in a family, which is of course the base unit of community, there's always going to be some petty misunderstandings and jealousies. And one of the secrets of keeping your community together is being able to negotiate those petty jealousies and come out on the other side accepting who everybody is while everybody negotiates and compromises. Now, if somebody could please explain negotiation and compromise to my cat. Having said that, Everybody, remember, we are a community, and we do better when we work for the community. That will protect the rights of the individuals because we will understand them and negotiate our way around them. So there, Minerva. Having said that, everybody stay safe, take care of each other, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody, stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.